Hey, this is Matt from Alpha Analyst, and in this video, we're going to cover how you can edit columns and rows in Microsoft Excel. As part of this video, we'll touch on how you can insert rows or columns, how you can delete rows and columns, how to hide rows and columns. We'll also talk about grouping, so you can group rows or group columns into different sections, which makes it much easier to view the data that you've put together in your spreadsheet. All right, let's get started. So if you come up to the top part of Microsoft Excel, you'll see that you have different columns here. So this is column C, this is column D, column I, column K. These are columns. And if you come down here to the rows on the left, these are rows. So this is row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So once again, the columns are at the top. This is column B, for example, and the rows are on the left. So this is row number 5. Okay, so now that we've touched on that, let's talk about how we can edit the size of rows and the size of columns. For column B, right now it's 99 pixels wide. If we want to make this wider, we can simply click on this line in between column B and column C, and we can drag it over to make it larger, or we could drag it back to make it smaller. Let's say that we have some text in that cell. Okay, if you want the size of column B to exactly match the text that you have in there, you can double click in between columns B and C, and you'll see that it automatically adjusts to the exact size in between the two. And while we're talking about this, let's also talk about the wrap text feature. So let's say that you had a table that you were working in, and let's say that you did not want it to be too wide. Let's say that you preferred instead for it to be taller. If you make the row a little bit taller, you'll notice that the font, it still goes into column C and column D. So how can you get that to stay within column B? The quickest way is to select the cell and then come up to the Home tab, and if you come over here to where it says Wrap Text, if you click on that, you'll see that it was able to get the text to stay within that one cell. And if you want to resize the row, similar to the columns, you can simply drag it down or drag it up to change the size, and you can double click to have it automatically resize. Another way to change the size of a row is to right click and then come over to row height, and in that dialog box you can change the exact height of the row. So as you're working in Excel, sometimes you might want to hide rows or columns. Let's talk about how to do that. The quickest way is to right click on the row or column that you want to hide and then come down here and choose hide. So once again, we came to row number 7. And then we right clicked on it and we came down here and chose hide. So that's how you can hide the row. So how can we unhide that row? If you simply highlight the rows that are around the hidden row, you can right click and choose unhide. And after doing that, the row that was hidden, it will now show up again. So sometimes in addition to hiding the rows, we might want to instead delete some rows. How do we do that? You can come over to the row or column and right click and then just look for the button that says delete. When you do that, the entire row will be deleted. While you're editing rows and columns, you might want them to sometimes be the exact same size. So let's say that you want these 3 rows, rows 6, 7, and 8, let's say that you want them to be larger and you also want them to be the same size. Here's what you can do. You can highlight those rows. So we're going to click on row 6 and drag down to row 8. Then we're going to click on the line in between 2 of those rows and drag it to make it larger. So if we want it to be, let's say 42 pixels, we can drag it until it says 42 and let go. And now all 3 of these rows are the exact same size. So you can simply highlight whatever rows you want or whatever columns you want. And if you drag the line in between 2 of the columns or rows, you can make them simultaneously larger or smaller. Also, as you're doing some work in Excel, you might find that you might want some additional space. So right here, you can see that we don't have that much space to do some work. So if we want additional space, we could highlight some rows. So I'm highlighting rows 7 through 10, and you can right click and choose insert. And the number of rows that show up will be based on how many you select. So if you just want one row to show up, you can right click on a row and you can choose insert, and one row will be added. If you highlight 2 rows and right click and choose insert, you'll have 2 rows added. So depending upon how much space you need, that's how you can decide how many columns or rows to add. So for example, if I highlight these 3 columns and right click and choose insert, there will be 3 new columns that will show up. As we're doing our work, sometimes we might want to change the ordering of rows or columns. So let's say that we have some data here. So you might notice that it says 1, 2, 4, 3, so it's a little bit out of order. How could we get this to be in order? One way is to click on row number 10. That highlights the entire row, and you'll see that because it's highlighted, we can select that row and we can drag it down. And then we can highlight rows 11 and 12, and then basically highlight, after we've highlighted them, we can drag them up, and now it's in the correct order, 1, 2, 3, 4. In addition to moving rows around, you can also delete rows. So if we have too many rows up here and we want to get rid of some of them, you can either right click on the row and choose delete, or you can select multiple rows and delete them. There's also an ability to select selective rows as compared to having to do either one row or a bunch of rows that are all together. So let's say, for example, you wanted to delete row 6 and row 11 at the same time. You can simply click on the first one, so we're going to click on the 6 for row 6, and then you can hold down the control key and then click on row 11. So now we have row 6 and row 11 selected. Now we can simply go to one of these rows, right click, and choose delete, and it's going to simultaneously delete both rows. There we go, so now both of those rows are deleted. Now let's touch on how we can group different sections. So here you'll see it says 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's call those numbers. We'll say section 1 numbers. And then down here let's have another section. Let's say section 2 letters. A, B, C, D. Okay, as you're working in Excel, sometimes you might have a very long worksheet that goes on for a long time. And you might want these different sections to be grouped so that it's much easier to go through the document. If you want to leave this heading here so that you can still see it, but you wanted to group these items, here's how you could do it. Simply highlight the rows that you want to group. So this is row 6 through row 9. And then come up to the data menu. So this is the data tab on the Excel ribbon. And then we're going to go over towards the far right where it says group. So you can either click this button to group it, or you can select the drop-down box and select group. After we did that, you'll notice that on the left here, there's a little minus icon as well as a line. This basically shows which items are part of that group. If you click on the minus sign, it hides that section, and if you click on the plus sign, they show up. So once again, the way that you do that is to select the rows that you want to group, and then on the data tab, come over here and select group. And after doing that, you can have these different sections that are easier to go through. So as you're going through your worksheet, if you want to see what the letters look like, you can click on this plus sign and all of the letters will show up. Just like you can do that for the rows, you can do the same thing for columns by selecting whichever columns you want to group and then clicking group, and the same functionality is available. So I hope you found this video to be useful, and thanks for watching.